Well, welcome to another show of the Hakimian show. And with me is Pedro Delgado from Miami. And you have an interesting story. Tell us a little bit about when you came from Cuba to America, what motivated that, and then I'm going to ask you a little bit about what you think our society's going. So what, again, motivated you to come here?
All right. I was 20 years old, but I had something in my mind before I came. I say, I am going to train in U.S. Army. I am going to come back with a rifle. I am going to liberate my country. That was under Castro's rule. Castro already have killed thousands upon thousands of people. As a matter of fact, Raul, which is the one that is now in charge, in January 1959, he put 71 people after making a hole behind them and manning a Brownie caliber 30 machine gun, killed 71 of them and to put them in the hole. So
he did it himself or his soldiers?
Himself.
Wow.
71. That happened in January 1959. Not only that, the people lost the right to property. Once they took over, there was no property because everything belonged to the state. It didn't happen immediately, it happened gradually, but in the end, people lost everything. They lost their house, they lost their cars, they lost everything they had, and the state is the one that got control of everything. Of course, the state means a select group of people, and a small group of people that is directing the whole thing and telling the rest of the people, I am doing that for you. Okay? That's the way that Marxism, the communist that was implemented in Cuba, operated, what they did. They fooled the people. At the very beginning, 98% of the people were supporting Castro. But they were fooled. They were fooled because they went along. They had a dictator, and they said, well, we are going to be better off. The United States participated in that. Not only the State Department, but really parts of the government were very heavy on it. I will give you an example. Batista had bought some planes he paid for, and they withdrew the plane from them, although the plane being paid, and the idea was to demoralize the army. Okay, so it was very sneaky way. And then New York Times saying Hubert Matthews to the mountains to make Castro like a liberator, like a hero. So
they sent camera people?
Hubert Matthews was a reporter, very well-known reporter. Okay, a reporter in.
So they set up the propaganda machine.
He sent it as a propaganda machine, and he worked like he's a hero. He comes to liberate, you know. But of course, he didn't came to liberate. He came to slave. But the people didn't know. So when he took over, 98% of the people say the greatest thing ever happened. Okay? But it didn't take any time at all before thousands of people were killed and everything happened, you see. But that's the way they work. They lie, they fool the people, and the people fall. And also, they work with something very important, envy.
Envy.
Yes, they give something that they used to do in Cuba in the very beginning. They say they had a factory with 100 people. They took it from the owners, and the state took control. Who would they give the plant? They will give the plant to the guy that sweeps the floor. Why? People say, but that's crazy. you do that, the guy doesn't know. The plant is going to go down. Communists don't care. They only care to have control. You see, when they have that guy owes everything to him, everything have been received, so that he will do exactly as he told to do. Okay, that's the way communism works. I've seen it.
Which is not sustainable.
Of course, it's not sustaining because that plant went down. That plant went bankrupt. But they only care about the control. But anyway, that's what happened. So 2 or 3 years later, I came to the States hoping that I could do something to free my country. It didn't happen. And like I said before,
and do you see these patterns? Because when I talk to older Cubans like you, obviously when you've lived through this kind of horror,
yes,
you're looking for patterns, right?
Yeah, of course.
So
yes.
What are the patterns that you see happening in America that scares you, that you would connect to Cuba?
Well, what I see and really is worrisome, how they get minorities to be fooled, to be in their envelope, in their control envelope, to say, I am doing this for you. It's the same thing that they did in Cuba. Like, there is no leaders in Cuba. They are white, all white.
Yeah.
So they lie to the people.
Castro made it a race issue, right?
Yeah.
And till this day, there's no black leadership.
Of course not.
Yeah.
It's lies. But they are very good. They fool people.
Yeah.
And control them. Like they control here the black vote in the United States. They do control it. They don't care to improve the people at all. They don't at all. They want to keep them at a level that they get their vote, but they never become middle class.
Yeah.
If they become middle class, they don't want to know any more about them because they realize they're lies. So it's just help to the point that you get your vote, but you stay, and the policies they have to keep the man away from the house, destroy the families, and that's what they want. Because if the man is there, they have more income, and the society is more healthy. But if they get the black man out of there, they make sure that that lady have all the kids and is a slave to the system.
Well, and you find this in Scripture, right? In the Bible. You find Herod wanting to be worshipped as God.
Yes.
In Acts, I believe, an angel struck him.
Yes.
Because enough's enough, right, at some point. You find Pharaoh oppressing the Jewish people. Nebuchadnezzar,
Right.
So you find that there is something within human beings that desires to be worshipped, that desires absolute power, control.
Yes.
And the framers of the Constitution, they're very well read. You know, they went to Yale and Harvard, all Christian schools, and they'd learned history. They've learned Protestant theology, biblical theology. They had learned about natural law, Lockean, John Locke's philosophy. They had learned, and they themselves were, some of them, immigrants from Britain, and so they had seen some of the tyranny under King George, and so they put this all together and realized, you know what, we need a government system that has checks and balances, and that people serve terms, people are voted, but there's a buffer, which is the electoral college, right? That if people really go crazy, they can kind of disregard the popular vote if people are, been bought. They recognize people can be bought. There could be real corruption in the voting process, and so they create all these layers of possibilities because they knew that government is the number one source of taking away people's rights.
Yes.
But yet you need government.
Yes.
So, in a way, we see this happening with kind of the democratic social philosophy, which basically is big government, right? And they've capitalized on slavery, which they themselves were the party of slavery.
Yes.
But they use that language that, hey, government is what stopped slavery. So we're going to stop injustice and evil. But yet they were the party that gave consent to that and fought for that. Can you speak on that? I mean, your blood must be boiling, man. I know Latins are very spicy, passionate people. What is happening in the Cuban community, especially amongst the more older ones that lived through this?
Yes. Like you said, the Democratic Party being behind slavery, and not only slavery, the KKK. Okay, they were the founders of that.
Yeah.
But still, they managed to fool the black to say, no, it's a Republican. They've done a fantastic job in fooling the people.
Yeah.
But we have to let them know that that's a big lie. That is not the way. They have changed the history of what took place in this country. You see, our founders more than 200 years ago, they said, okay, that you need, to keep the Constitution and to keep the Republic that we have, you need more people and educated people. So if you keep the people in ignorance, well, then you have it made. You are, you are in control of the situation, and this is very, very bad because these people been working in this country since the 30s. Yeah. How they did that? Well, there was a fellow by the name, I believe, John Dewey, and this guy, he was a Marxist guy. So
is it Alinsky? Alinsky was.
No, Alinsky was after him.
Yeah.
The fellow I am talking.
Oh yeah. Oh, it was earlier.
Yeah, earlier.
Yeah.
I am talking in the 30s. You see, he brought communists from the European universities, okay, to teach in the Ivy Leagues, none other than the Ivy Leagues. Of course, those generate more Marxists and more Marxists. So right now, at this moment, the education in this country is controlled by people that are totally liberal, totally that are anti-republic, anti-everything that is good for the country, the good values that we have. Well, they are against all that. And that's why it degenerates the mind of the people. And that's the situation we got. Millions of people that have been poison minds that have been really brainwashed to believe their lies.
Yeah. And then what is it? And so you are, who are you voting for and behind in this presidency?
Well, I tell you what, very early, Dr. Carson realized that the people were very happy when he talked, but when the moment came to vote, they didn't give him the vote. So he said, well, that's the way the people vote. So he got out. But he started analyzing the different people that were available, and he came to the conclusion that that Trump was a man that could help America. Trump have many things that personally I don't like his form. I guess most people have to say that it's not the way that we are used to be taught from a politician, etc. And it's true. I don't like the mannerism. You know, I am used to something different. But you have to see what Trump is doing. Basically, Trump is trying to take the country back. And by taking the country back, it means many things. It means that our industry that have gone overseas, that industry is going to be brought back because he's going to provide incentives also for minorities to get money. In other words, 10% of what they have to pay is going to come to minorities. So for the black people, for the Latin people, to the people that are in a bad economic condition, that will be fantastic. And for the country at large, will be tremendous.
Absolutely.
We will be able to have a better economy. And you see, but this affects the people in control.
Yeah.
The people in control are
partly why they don't want to come back is they want cheap labor, which is in line with the slavery narrative of these multinational corporations. Because again, ultimately, they want cheap labor. They don't want to hire American IT workers, American manufacturers.
That's right.
Instead of $20 billion profit, they're not okay with $17 billion. Now, this is the thing. We don't want government to force them, but he's incentivizing this type of concern. I mean, Apple says they love America, but yet all their manufacturing is overseas. Ford says we love America, but now, as of this week, they made a commitment to completely go to Mexico after they got bailed out. Yeah. So there is something where people aren't, these corporations are not operating out of concern for the American worker, and it's not, again, it's not a handout, it's a hand up, right? And guess what? You know, at some point, like, making $3 billion more, is that really worth your own people not having sustainable income? And then the only income that comes is federal jobs. You know, working for hospitals that are federally subsidized, working for schools that, I mean, the only jobs in South Florida are that really, apart from tourism and export, is federally connected. That's the irony. And is that what we want? That's why we have so much poverty in Miami, in South Florida.
That's right. That's right. That's precisely right. And not only that, there is a lot of money that is transferred under the table when these deals take place. When a company that employs 5,000, 10,000 goes overseas,
politicians get paid.
Somebody gets paid underneath.
Yeah, not as much. Of course, they always look at the profit margins. But yeah, the politicians get paid, and then they get $4 an hour laborers in Mexico or China.
China, I'm sorry. China is much, much less. They make sense. They don't make $1 an hour. No,
wow.
In China it's much less. But you see, there is more. That's only part of. The other part is that there are regulations that are created here to force the company out, to create problem for them purposely, so they have no choice but to leave.
The socialists are trying to be global.
That's right.
So they want to extend their powers.
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't realize that slavery was a global thing. Muslims took part in it.
Yes.
The Africans took part in it.
Yes.
And so did Europeans took part in it. Spaniards took part in it. So it wasn't a local thing.
No.
It was a global, multinational industry for labor. It had very little to do with race and color. A lot of the Spaniards integrated with the blacks, and that's where Brazilians came, and Puerto Ricans, and Dominicans, and Cubans. So the men and the women didn't care about race. I mean, beauty is beauty, right? It was about greed. And this is where James, the half brother of Jesus, says in James chapter 5, you rich people weep, and again, God's not against rich, but he's against rich people who are greedy, and they fail to pay the men and women who mow their fields. He says farmers, and the free market principle works when you have morality, right? Because even capitalism doesn't work if you have immoral people bucking the system. And that's why I like what Faith and Freedom stands for, because it's basically saying, look, we want free markets, but we also need God's commandments, right? Thou shalt not steal.
Yes.
You know, if you're making billions of profits and you're paying people $1 an hour and they can't get a living wage, but we don't want you to mandate a minimum wage. We want these people to do it because it's right. And what's interesting is that conservative corporations tend to be some of the highest paying. Chick-fil-A, In-N-Out, Hobby Lobby. And why are these Christian corporations, you talk to them, why do you guys pay your employees so much? They were doing it before people started talking about raising the wage. They say because, look, we care about our employees. We take care of them. They take care of us.
Yes. We
don't need $1 billion extra. In fact, they're giving the profits to social services and missions, charity. And that's what's ironic, is that people say, oh, conservatives are stingy, but there's more charitable giving and missionary humanitarian money that's given through evangelicals and Catholics than any other groups of people. And they're not forced. They do it because they believe in charity and being generous.
Amen.
So it's not like people who think like this, right, from a biblical faith perspective, are stingy people. Per capita, they give more to charities and private organizations. But liberals, all the liberals I know, they always want to take federal grant monies and give it to poor people. You don't find liberal churches out in Haiti, in Cuba, feeding the poor and building orphanages. No. If they do it, it's always because they got grant monies that are coming from the federal government. It's not their own charitable giving from their local churches. World Vision. I mean, look at all these organizations. They're doing massive stuff, right? You got Franklin Graham's organization. I mean, there's tons of organizations like this: Catholic, Christian, Mormon, and faith is motivating them. And yet, people say, "Oh, we don't want let you faith people to have an influence in public policy and in the Senate and Congress because you guys are dangerous." When through the history of America, it was the abolitionists, the evangelicals, the Puritans, the Quakers,
Yes.
who fought against slavery. Most of the framers, people don't even realize it, most of the framers who were basically, some were Christian influence or devout Christians, the first act of Congress was to abolish the slave trade. And all of them said slavery is a great evil, but we can't deal with it now because we're about to go to war with Britain. And most of them were abolitionists who joined abolitionist societies to try to persuade people against the act and the behavior. Most of them end up giving away giving freedom to their slaves. And some of them didn't, because if they did give freedom to their slaves would be good as dead. So the slaves didn't want to be free because their masters were so benevolent. And in that American society, if they had complete freedom, they would have just been kidnapped and resold again. So there was all these dynamics at play. But all of the framers, most of the framers, and 90% of them, were abolitionists. Because I hear people say, "Oh, you know what? Forget capitalism, forget U.S. democracy, and as a republic," because the framers were all evil racists and slave owners. Man, and they've never studied what they wrote and said about slavery and how the process it would be undone, which they prophesied that there would be a civil war, but it'd have to come internally as the people got convinced that it was a great social evil. Amazing.
And you're talking past history, but if you go now, what happened in Haiti, and you know what the Hillary did, what the husband did, what they did in Haiti.
Yeah.
You can talk for hours.
Or even Rwanda. The American 1 million Rwandans were slaughtered, and then he apologized, Bill Clinton. But how many times does he keep apologizing and doing the same thing? Man, Pedro, it's so good talking to you, man. I appreciate your passionate discourse and also your story. My story was similar. My dad, I'm half Armenian Lebanese. My dad fled a civil war in Beirut when the Muslims came in through immigration. See, you talk to any Christian Lebanese person, because Lebanon is the only official Christian country in the Middle East. And they'll tell you they're doing here in America and Britain, in France, in Germany, what they did they came in through mass immigration because there was so much instability in Syria and Jordan, and eventually Hezbollah, Hamas, completely took over. Even though constitutionally still Christian, the president now is Muslim, but he came in through civil war, and then a lot of Lebanese Christians fled, went to all parts of the world, the diaspora. My dad went to Liberia, West Africa, had me, and then President Doe was assassinated in 1977, and we fled Liberia, came to America. So I understand the evils of government, and when dictators and people who don't respect constitutions, rights, and they don't have a Christian worldview. The reason why the framers wrote the Constitution the way they did is because their Christianity said, you know what, we cannot force people into a religion. We cannot force people to stop their speech. People need freedom. The number one issue they had was slavery. And they said, you know what, this is evil, and it will have to be dealt with, but it's through blood and through war, which eventually did through Abraham Lincoln's Republican Abolitionist Party. But the interesting part is this. We're here in America because of our flight from wicked governments, and people tell us, oh, you're taking this stuff too seriously, faith and freedom too seriously. Man, are you crazy? Do you know how terrible it is? And then my grandmother, whole family was massacred by the Ottoman Turks in Armenia. It was the first genocide of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Hitler quoted the Armenian genocide while he was developing his party. He said if they didn't remember the Armenians, they won't remember the Jews. Let me tell you something. That's what ISIS is doing right now.
Yes.
They've killed over 170,000 Christians, Yazidis, different sects of Islam in the last 5 years alone.
Yes. Yes. And
our president said, oh, they're a JV team.
Yes.
He's very slow to respond, but yet if one person who's gay it comes on the news that some Christian baker said that they refused to do a cake with two men kissing, he gets up on national television and he makes adamant speeches against this type of so-called bigotry, but yet 100,000 Christians are being slaughtered, and he's just like, okay, we're going to do something eventually. Something is wrong, man.
Yeah.
And again, these governments are taking people's lives, and people don't realize that one day America could be there if we take for granted our faith that influences policy since its birth, influenced the abolitionist Republican Party. I'm not a Republican, I'm an independent, but I can truly say as a kingdom activist that the Republican Party, when I put it in balance with the Democrats, okay, the Democrats are heavy in blood, the blood of babies, the blood of guilt, the blood of murder,
Yes.
the blood of injustice. And not to say Republicans are perfect, because they're people.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, they have principles and ideas that match up with Judeo-Christian thought and natural philosophy and law. So again, God bless you, and I appreciate your time.